Hello, hello, everybody, and good evening to you. This is our second to last broadcast of the summer session. I will attempt to do another one probably by probably, I mean definitely on Wednesday around 7:30 p.m. These days, they seem to be running a little late. I'm not quite sure what the deal is, but um, we're here at 8 p.m. and hopefully we can get a couple people in here, but if not, that's okay. Anyway, my rant is about I will be going live on Wednesday around 7:30 p.m. or close to there, maybe around 8, like I've been running lately. Um, it's been a little more. They've added a couple more hoops to broadcasting on YouTube than I'm used to. So I have to continually reset some things, but it's okay. In any case, today we're going to go over the persuasion speech details. They're up there on the screen there. But before I even do any of that, I should probably provide a link so that you can all watch. That seems like a wise thing to do. See, I'm just in such a hurry and a tizzy that I am forgetting that you really need to uh, have access to this information. And wouldn't that be ironic? Okay, I got the link. Let's go ahead and go to our. See, I even had this queued up ready to go, so you don't have to watch me fumble around with it. Go ahead and submit it. So it is the right section this week, isn't it? Last week I actually set it to an older section. How crazy of me, but we got it all corrected. Okay, so everybody should have a link to this. Before I get too far in there, there is a second pre-recorded video I would like for you to watch. I was originally going to assign you some more reading from the textbook. Um, but gosh, golly gosh, given that I'm going to have to give you some written work this week as well, and we'll talk about that over the broadcasts. I just didn't feel like you needed to read it, and probably watching a video about it from the previous semester would probably be the better way to spend your time, because you will have to do a written assignment this week, which is a discussion board, and you'll also have to turn in your final speech, which is a short, persuasive speech. I noticed that all of you had gone through, or at least almost all of you have gone through and given me your topics already and kind of talked about them with your classmates. From what I can see, things look good. Similar to last time, if I had a major problem with your topic, I will write you right away. Otherwise, I'll give you some written feedback over the next couple of days. I'm going to be doing a lot of giving you feedback over the next couple of days. I would like to have your informative speeches graded. Uh, let's say by Wednesday at the latest. And that'd be probably a late time on Wednesday. I did write that I'd try to get to you by Tuesday, but that assumes that you're one of the first people that I'm grading. So, in any case, that's kind of the time frame for me over the next week. The time frame for you, though, is probably what you're more concerned about. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the superficial requirements for this persuasive speech. Um, the persuasive speech, again, is a speech where you try to take, and again, like I said, most of you have seemed to have gotten a hang of this. You try to take someone from doing, or rather from not doing or not believing something, to doing and or believing something. All right, that's what persuasion is. You're making sure that someone is doing something more than they're doing now, or believing something different than they're believing now. Otherwise, it's not really persuasion. Nonetheless, that's kind of what you're doing for the speech. You guys have topics. The time limit is 5 to 8 minutes. So it's not a long speech by any means, and it is the tendency for this speech to go a little long. I know it seems like that would probably not be the case because you don't necessarily have a lot of time to turn it in, as compared to the other speeches where you had at least a couple of weeks to do it. Um, but when just trust me on that. It takes usually people go a little longer. So as a courtesy, I've kind of expanded it beyond the 3 to 5 minute section to the 5 to 8 minutes. It should contain at least 3 arguments. We'll talk about what those are in a bit, but they include the claim data warrant sets. Must include an introduction and conclusion. You want to write those last. Just a little reminder there. And sources must have spoken word citations during speech. All right, we'll kind of go over those again. Um, and also, your outline must be turned in with the speech on the same assignment link if possible. It should allow you to do multiple submissions. Unfortunately, I tried, one of the things that delayed me this morning, or not this morning, this evening, was I was trying to model for you how you would turn two files in. And when I click on assignment links, I couldn't get it to show me the student view. It just showed me instructors can't view the assignment link this way. You're going to have to go to the grade center to give your students a grade, and that's not what I was trying to do at all. But I was trying to give you an example of how to turn into files. But if it turns out it's problematic, we'll deal with that when it happens. And of course, this is the kicker here at the bottom: due by 11:59 p.m. on June 16th. That is this coming Friday. It is also the last actual day of the summer session. Now, having said that, if you perceive that just 5 days is going to be too much, or rather, I should say, too little time, and the workload is too much, I can probably accept it later. So, for example, like maybe next Sunday at 11:59 p.m. The grades for me are due on Wednesday at 4 p.m. So I do need at least a couple days to grade it. So this is what makes this deadline kind of important, that it's on Friday, because it will probably take me at least that long to grade. However, if we can come to an agreement where let me know ahead of time that it's going to be an issue, then I will know to manage my time a little better, and we'll make sure that you get a fair grade with some feedback by the time the semester ends. Now, I did make an agreement with some people last semester, and a couple of them were kind of ornery about it, but this ended up being the agreement, was that I allowed them to turn it in at the last possible moment, which was beyond the semester technically, but with enough time for me to grade. But I didn't give them enough. I didn't give myself enough time to give feedback. I said, if you turned it in, on the day that grades were due, for example, I would look at it, I would assign it a rating, and then that's it. Because I would just watch it once all the way through, say, that seems about to be a B, and then whatever that whatever grade that turned out to be with your average was how it went. And so there might be a chance for an individual arrangement like that, but please do understand that is the bargain. I have you turn in things when I do, so that I have time to try to give you some feedback. If I allow you to turn them in later, it actually means that I have to work a little faster. And when we work fast, we start cutting corners, and the corner to cut for this last speech would probably be writing you feedback. So, but just so you understand that, I'm okay taking things a little later than Friday, but you've got to let me know ahead of time, and you have to be aware that I'll be working faster and cutting corners too. And that may not necessarily be the best thing, especially if you want the feedback for the speeches. So just be aware of that. But otherwise, that's what our week is looking like. Um, yes, excellent. So let's go ahead and talk about the academic content for the week. Now, there is a second video that I would like for you to watch. It is linked here. It is a longer presentation on the kind of the foundations of persuasion, what kinds of propositions there are. It will include a little bit of a review of what we're going to talk about tonight, but it's longer, and it includes more information. Today, we're just going to go over what you really need to know to get your speech done. Where did I put my? There it is. So that's the deal with that. So let's go ahead and talk about it. Let's go ahead and scroll past this. I'll post this document also when we're done with it. So the thing that you need to do to create a persuasive speech, all persuasive speeches contain arguments. And what are arguments? For this class, and for really anything that you would do at Ball State involving argumentation, is we use what we call the Toulmin model. And the Toulmin model comes from a philosopher um, who looked at the most persuasive speakers throughout the ages, particularly of the English language. And he found that there was a particular way that people made arguments. And even though this is in the English language, he found that more of the classical stuff, anyway, also followed this kind of general pattern. And it does follow a particular order in which certain things have to happen before other certain things. Um, we're going to go over what we call the primary triad, which are the three components that he felt were the absolute necessary to make a convincing argument. He's got other sets of triads and components here to talk about, but when you take a debate class or a persuasion course, you can probably worry about those at that time. But so this is how you make a basic argument that will persuade an audience, or at least we hope so. So all arguments that are persuasive start with a claim. Okay, and again, this is how they start. This is the order you need to go in. Start with a claim, and this, in terms of writing, you can think of it would be like your topic sentence of a paragraph. It's the first thing out of your mouth when you want to make a main point. Okay, and a claim specifically is a statement you want your audience to believe. Okay, so it is not neutral. I know a lot of your classes in English, maybe even other times, if you're taking a journalism class, they try to uh, impress upon you the need for neutrality and to sound like you're open-minded. I'm not necessarily saying that you need to sound closed-minded. In fact, you should always be open to new ideas and different perspectives. But these statements are not neutral. Okay, and they are very certain, as long as you can be certain and truthful. Okay, so if you are certain that 50% of the time people who drink Pepsi secretly prefer Coke, then you would say 50% of the people who drink Pepsi secretly prefer Coke. You don't necessarily add in more uncertainty because you know the statistics of 50% kind of makes it like a coin toss. Maybe the person drinking Pepsi right now secretly wants a Coke and maybe not. That's kind of implied in the statement. You don't necessarily need to go out of your way to say, maybe possibly, from what I've read, 50% might possibly be able to want secretly some Coke, right? Or something kind of more awkward like that. Um, this statement is direct and is a direct, again, it's a statement you want your audience to believe. And it's supposed to be truthful, but at the same time, it's not neutral. If you are trying to get people to drink Coke instead of Pepsi, your statement would be something like, Pepsi is the better soft drink is a better soft drink than Coke. Or probably more specifically for our main point, Pepsi is less healthy for you than Coke. Have the next part. So let's go ahead and kind of model this out. Let's go ahead and just do an example, fun argument. Pepsi is not as healthy for you as Coke. Coke. Man, that was really... so Pepsi is not as healthy for you as Coke. Okay, so the next part of this, the next thing that you would do to make this an argument, okay, we just have a statement right now, is you would add some data. And this is, sometimes I use the word evidence because that's how we talk about it in the debate world. But it's the same idea. It's information, right in here, or evidence, that you feel validates your claim. And it should be from a source other than yourself. Okay, it has to be a source other than yourself. You don't get around that. So you would prefer, or we would prefer, quotes or diagrams or descriptions of diagrams. Okie dokie. So let's say, for example, if we were going to try to support the statement that Pepsi is not as healthy, all kinds of typos tonight. Pepsi is not as healthy for you as Coke. We would probably say, and I'm just going to make this up, so please don't repeat it. Pepsi contains 39%. Oh, 39%. $39, that'd be great. 39% more carcinogens. Coke. Now, of course, that's kind of a fantastical information there. You would probably say, well, Weisenheimer, what's your source on that? And this is where you get into citing your sources orally. And you can do it really, you can cite your sources really anywhere in the data portion. I usually recommend that you do it at the beginning. I usually train debaters to do it at the beginning. But technically, you can do it afterward, too. So let's go ahead and have a model where it's after it. This startling information comes from John Smith. All right, let's do John Smoth. Why not? Writing in Time magazine on October 32nd. Make sure it's really fake. 2020. So it's from the future too. But the things that you want to remember here is that this oral citation includes the author's name, the publication, the date. Now, sometimes, and the date published, accessed, or copywritten, and it should go in that order. Yeah. No, I misspoke. Nope. It should go in this order. So, in order of preference, I should say. So, let's say you don't know the date published. Then you'd want to look around on the website or the electronic copy, whatever you've got, the book, and try to find the date the material was copywritten, because that'll let you know when it went through the copyright process and provide at least some context in terms of the time period in which it was written. And if you can't find that information, then of course the date that you read it or accessed it. So if you can find the date published, do that. Can't find it, copywritten. Can't find that, go ahead and tell us when you found it. Now, that's all you need for a spoken citation. You don't necessarily need the article title. You don't need the volume number. You don't need what issue it is. You don't need the page number if it's a physical source. You don't need the paragraph number. I know that some parenthetical citations on essays require that you use a paragraph or even sentence number. We're not concerned with that. It's supposed to be enough information to make sure that someone can find it that's listening to your speech, but also not so much information that it really trips up the flow of your speech. All right. You already have to go through some grammatical gymnastics to put in a phrase here that lets people know you're about to start a source citation. You don't need to have weird, funky things. Also, the author's name, you can state it as it's naturally spoken. So you don't necessarily need to say, according to Smoth John from Time Magazine. That's Smoth John would be how you do it on like an MLA or APA works cited list. Go ahead and put the first name first, last name last, or however you would say it in the natural language of the source that you're citing. So don't worry about reformatting it like it's MLA or APA. This is purely author's name, publication, date published, and you're done. Right? It's pretty fast, pretty quick. Did I write on here how many sources you need? Yes, I did. It contains at least 3 arguments. So here's a critical thinking exercise for us. If it needs at least 3 arguments, it needs at least 3 source citations. 3 citations. There. Because you need at least 3 pieces of data, right? Finally, all right, so all that information's out there. We talked about the dangerous amount of carcinogens in Pepsi, and then finally we have the warrant. And the warrant is the part of your speech or the part of your argument where you explain explicitly why data supports. So you would probably say, well, carcinogens in Pepsi, that's definitely something that doesn't indicates it's not as healthy for you as Coke. But remember, your audience doesn't already believe what you're trying to get them to believe. They're going to be skeptical. They might be thinking of ways that maybe you're wrong. And so you need this warrant on here to really solidify and make more ironclad your argument so that people have less room to doubt. Now, of course, human creatures are unusual and they will find ways to doubt you anyway. But if you forget your warrant, you're really opening the door for people not to believe you. You don't want to do that. So even though it might seem like the simplest explanation to your mind, you need to explain explicitly to others why your data supports your claim. So we would probably write something here like, as we can see, with almost a third more toxins. It's not actually correct. I'm probably sure someone from the health science major is probably yelling at me right now, but more toxins in the same volume. Volume is Coke. We can safely say that you are ingesting more bad substances. There we go. That's being more specific. Drinking Pepsi. Let's see. Drinking Coke, the healthier choice. It is kind of repetitive, but that's again something that you want to do during a speech. That's how it's different from writing. In writing, people can go back and check your information. They can go back and figure out what your idea or your claim was. In speaking, you don't have that luxury of checking again. So you do need to be repetitive. So don't worry about being repetitive that way. But anyway, so that would be, if you have all these three things together, your first main point would look like something like this. Let's go ahead and just copy and paste it together so it looks fluid. All right, Pepsi is not for healthy as Coke. Okay, and we copy and paste that. Again, it's doing it as it would appear naturally. Right, so there's your first main point. There's your first argument, and it's Pepsi versus Coke speech. And it's pretty clear what the argument is. I think it's pretty clear that the information does support the claim if it were true. It's probably not. But this is a solid argument. So your speech needs to contain 3 of these sets. Okay? 2 of these things create yourself, but they're short explanations or short statements. And 3 of these things, at least 3 of these, and you define information. So it's not necessarily a very long speech in terms of writing. Now, in my experience, things aren't going to be this short for the data, and things probably aren't going to be as short for the warrant. Statements, claims are usually pretty short, but this other stuff is usually a bit longer in terms of how involved it is. Sometimes you feel like your data really explains itself well, and so maybe you'll have a couple paragraphs even that you're quoting here. And then your warrant will be something more like, and as you can see with the explanation this author provided, why my statement is true. And your warrant would be really short. And data will be very long. But the point is, each argument, in my experience as a debate coach and a speech teacher, each argument generally lasts about 30 seconds to a minute. And that's a lot of variance, I suppose. But when you think of it this way, if we have a 5-minute minimum, okay, Um, then and you have 3 arguments, so that's a maximum of that's about a minute apiece. Okay, so you're at 3 minutes with that. Then you have an introduction that you need to have, which we've already talked about this semester, and a conclusion that you need to have. Each of those is about a minute. Wabam, come right out at your minimal time, 5 minutes. So that's kind of how that will work. Now, this argument here is too simple to last a full 30 seconds, and I don't even think it lasts 20. Um, but your arguments, when it comes from actual research, will be a little longer, and you might have a little longer explanation here. Because you might have to connect the dots in a more, I guess, figurative sense, but a more literal way too. You might have to connect the dots for the audience. So that might explain why this is going to be a little. But in any case, 3 arguments with an intro and conclusion should last about 5 minutes, assuming you have a fairly typical, actually researched argument, not one that's just made up and to the point like this one. Also, welcome. I see that my viewer count has gone up by actually 3 people, so welcome everyone. If you have a question, go ahead and ask. I know that you're coming in the middle of it, and I'll be happy to go back and review things. This will be posted, by the way, on our Blackboard. It's just we're creating it as we're going along. So we've kind of gone over introductions and conclusions already. We went over sources. I can't really show you how to do an outline and speech on the same assignment link. I have been advising people when I was checking my email this evening that if you can't get your outline turned in as a document, don't sweat it. Just copy and paste it into that comment box, and then you can hit submit, and I'll still see your outline. Again, this is going to be due 16th. And kind of keeping with our activity, we are going to go ahead and, well, before we do that, we're going to look at an example. But before we look at an example, I want to briefly go over the activity I'm going to have you do. I also want to be mindful of my time here. We've only been going on for about 27 minutes, so that's okay, I guess. Let's go ahead and look at your discussion board. So here is your informative speech. Here's your written assignment. One of the components on your syllabus was that you will have to have an audience for one of your speeches. I said at the beginning of the semester, I'm not going to bother trying to get you to arrange a time with other people to do this speech, because that actually kind of exponentially increases the amount of time it takes for you to get done. So instead, we're going to give yourself an audience by using members of this class. So your informative speech will utilize your peers. And so here's how this will work. By Wednesday, June 14th, you need to go to this discussion board here and upload or give a YouTube link for your persuasive video under your group. Let's go ahead and click here real quick. I have put each of you into groups of 4. If I somehow missed you, I apologize. Let me know right away, and I will assign you randomly. But what you will do is you will click on whatever group you are. Let's say I am Sarah. I will go into this group. I will create a reply to this message. And I will put in my YouTube link. And of course, that's not a YouTube link. I thought I still had my YouTube link on my clipboard. I'm not sure why I thought that. But anyway, you get the idea. Would say something like, here's my informative speech. Boop. And then you would hit submit, and it would become part of the thread. Now, of course, I don't really want to do any of that. Let's go ahead and get out of here. Bring us back here. So that's what you need to do by Wednesday. Now, once Wednesday rolls around, you need to look at your fellow classmates' speeches. Where can I go back here? Funny that the OK button actually brings you back on this interface. Anyway, you go here. This is the second part. So by Friday, and again, this is what you need to do for I've divided it up, so hopefully it's easier and less of a how we say, a cluster fudge go to do this. So hopefully everybody has it up by Wednesday. Then over Thursday and Friday, you can look at your group speeches and write each person one thing you really liked about their speech, one thing you think they could do to improve, and please be kind. Say things like, don't say things like, "Man, your speech sucked." Instead, say things like, "I really feel like the clouds you included on your PowerPoint slide in the background were unnecessary. They were kind of distracting." And then you would include one other thing you really liked about their speech. In teaching terms, we call this the sandwich, right? You have a big piece of bread over here that's really nice. Have a little bit of meat that maybe isn't so good, but is healthy and good for you to grow with. And then maybe a nice, delicious piece of bread at the bottom. Call that a sandwich. It's got one plus, one kind of not a plus, and then one plus at the end. So the whole post for each person is just 3 sentences minimum. You can, of course, write more than that, but that's a burden you're taking upon yourself. And that means that if you do all 4 people, which would be 3 people, you only need to write 9 sentences. You don't need to give yourself feedback. So you'd only be writing for 3 other people. And that's 9 sentences total for your assignment over the week. And I hope that when I say it that way, it doesn't seem so daunting. You're just posting a link and or a file, and then you're going to write 9 sentences on top of recording and preparing your persuasive speech. So hopefully that's not so bad. But this is necessary because, again, a component of this course is to have one of your speeches be watched by others, and also for you to receive some peer feedback. It's part of the curriculum. I can't really change that. And this activity should be an expedient way of achieving that goal for your learning. All right, so let's go ahead, now that I've explained the assignments, let's go ahead and kind of look at a speech here. I need to turn off this particular thing real quick because it does include a student's name. I do believe we will not turn it off. All right, fine. I'll turn it off the old-fashioned way. Oop. And then we'll bring it up. We'll go ahead and add the play capture back. Yes, there we go. Okay. So let's go ahead and watch this speech. It's exactly the amount of time that I would like for your speech to be. And I'll give you some thoughts about how the speech went. Again, I am using the rubric in your workbook to do this speech. It is the instructor's persuasive speech rubric. It's towards the end because it's the last speech. But it is in your workbook, and it is labeled instructor's persuasive speech rubric, or grade sheet, rather. Okay, here we go.
John Wayne Gacy, Ted Bundy, and Eileen Wuornos are some of the many that have been killed from the death penalty. They all deserve to be from their serial killings, but what gives us the right to do so? Today I'm going to tell you the issues with the death penalty and why it needs to be abolished. I've researched both sides of this controversy, and the need to abolish the death penalty is the stronger argument. First, I'm going to tell you the expenses of the death penalty. Second, I'll tell you the risk that comes along with it. And last, I'll tell you its ineffectiveness and the question of human rights. Let me begin with the issues of the death penalty. The death penalty is expensive. Why? According to Richard C. Dieter, the executive director of the Death Penalty Information Center, almost all death penalty cases cannot afford their own lawyer. The state has to provide them. The expenses included in the death penalty are legal costs, pretrial costs, jury selection, trial, incarceration, and appeal costs. For example, between 1982 and 1997, counties spent a shocking $1.6 billion on capital crime trials, according to Catherine Baker in her article titled "The Budgetary Repercussions of Capital Convictions." Therefore, all of the murderers who can afford a great attorney usually get off with their crime. For example, Casey Anthony and O.J. Simpson both had great lawyers. They both got off with their crime. So for the poor and the minorities, they usually get the death penalty because they cannot afford a good lawyer. Simply meaning it's unfair. Now that I've told you the costliness, I'll tell you the risk that comes along with it. There is a risk of killing the innocent. There was a story in the news recently about a man named Troy Davis who was put to death, who's still trying to fight to prove his innocence. 7 of the 9 witnesses that stated they saw Davis kill a police officer in 1991 recanted their original testimony. The appeal to the Supreme Court was denied, and Davis was put to death on September 21st, 2011. According to the Death Penalty Information Center, 138 people in 26 states have been exonerated from death row since 1973, with proof of their innocence. This proves that before the advances in technology, such as DNA testing, the justice system was and still is very capable of making mistakes. There is no way to tell if the over 1,000 people executed since 1973 were innocent, but there have been multiple cases where new evidence has emerged after the defendant has already been executed. My next issue is its ineffectiveness as a deterrent to murder. Supporters of the death penalty say that the death penalty makes a person think twice before killing. So let's think about this. They're crazy enough to take someone else's life. Do you honestly think they're going to think twice about having their own life taken away from them? And don't most murderers commit suicide after committing their crime, so wouldn't the death penalty be an incentive to kill? Statistics show in a current issues article titled Capital Punishment, from the years 1990 through 2009, states with the death penalty have higher murder rates than the states without the death penalty. Also, supporters say that the death penalty gives justice to the family of the victim. But no matter what happens to the killer, the victim is still gone. They're not going to be brought back to life, and the family still has to live with that loss forever. And whoever thinks about the killer's family, I mean, don't you think they have feelings too? And it doesn't change what the killer did, but since when do we have the right to treat people as if they weren't humans? Which brings me to my next point, is the question of our rights. Does the government actually have the right to take someone's life? Wouldn't the death penalty be going against our 8th Amendment right of cruel and unusual punishment? There is a pattern of racial bias in sentencing that is clearly unconstitutional. Also, this sends the wrong message. We're going to kill someone for killing. Doesn't make sense, and it contradicts the whole idea. In conclusion, first I told you the costliness of the death penalty. Second, I told you the risk that comes along with it. Last, I told you the ineffectiveness and the question of our rights. So now it's time for you to vote. Vote to abolish the death penalty. 36 states still have the death penalty, including Texas. States without the death penalty have lower murder rates. So you decide which makes more sense.
Okay, so that was a speech that was more or less what I would have liked. What I would have liked. What I would like for you to do. Now let's see if I can get out of this window without exposing. That is the real test here, isn't it? Doop, boop. Yeah, I think that worked. So the things that I was looking for primarily was that she had an introduction, and during that introduction, she gave a pretty clear attention getter in that she talked about some well-known serial killers. She even mentioned in her introduction about why she felt, or that a lot of people feel, they should have been executed. But then she also talked about her actual position on this proposition, which is, should we have the death penalty? The question was no. She felt the reason why, in a very succinct way, was that there are stronger arguments for, in her opinion, against the death penalty. She previewed those arguments, kind of. I would have appreciated a listing out of what she was going to do, and she would have said, "I find that the argument is stronger for the death is stronger against the death penalty for three reasons, and those reasons are blah 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 and blah blah blah." That's what I would like you to do. So she probably would have lost a couple points there. However, otherwise, she did do the Toolman model. She started each main point with a claim. She had data. She cited that data more or less the way that I would like for you to cite it, with claim data and warrant, with author, publication, and date. And she also used quotes and statistics to do her to stand as her data. A lot of people might want to use paraphrasing, and you really shouldn't. If you feel the need to paraphrase, what you probably can do instead is cut down on the actual material and that you want to quote. So, like, let's say there's two paragraphs that are in this written document that you think are relevant, but it's very long, so you want to paraphrase. Instead of paraphrasing, do something we would call cutting. See if I can bring you to a better page for this. So let's say that there is a lot of information here. What you could do instead is, instead of paraphrasing, just take out the stuff that you think is the most important. So for this argument, we could imagine that there was a whole lot of information leading up to what carcinogens are in Pepsi and Coke, what carcinogens maybe they share, maybe what carcinogens specifically are in Pepsi. But really, none of that is important. What is important to make your point is only this last sentence. Was only this part. There's 39% more. So you, instead of paraphrasing it and just saying, well, Pepsi has a lot more carcinogens in it, would still use a direct quote from the paragraph, but you wouldn't quote the entire paragraph, if that makes any sense. What you would want to do is not alter any words, and not alter the order in which they appear, but you can skip certain parts. Like, let's say after this paragraph, you had a paragraph in your research that started this way, and then there was a huge list of what those carcinogens were. You don't necessarily you're not obligated to tell us what those are, as long as leaving that information out doesn't change the actual substance of what the source is saying. Anyway, so she did that, the data part correct. Her warrants were pretty decent, particularly the point about the cost, in which she explained where the costs come from. Now, of course, this could have been, and it wasn't quite clear, but it could have been part of her quote from the source that she had for what the millions of dollars were. But she did explain why there is a lot of cost involved in executing someone versus actually letting in sell. So that was a great way that she could explain that, because at least as someone who has debated this issue multiple times over the years, competitive format, and then coaching people debating the death penalty, it is kind of a counterintuitive argument for people to understand. And this is sometimes what's true about persuasion. It is actually more expensive to execute someone than to keep them alive for, say, 40 years in a jail cell. That doesn't seem true, because when you execute someone, they don't spend all that time in the jail cell, and therefore aren't eating all the food, taking all the electricity, drinking all the water, using all the plumbing for the toilet, and what other services they might be required in that incarceration. But it's when you explain that it's got the legal fees in there, and the last chance appeals, and the cost of the actual medicine, quote unquote medicine, that they use to execute the people, the cost of other varieties of infrastructure and things, when you explain it, then you're like, oh, I understand now, and that's would be the warrant here. Like, I understand now why you would say it is more expensive to execute someone than to leave them in the cell, right? That would be the claim here. Um, so that's why you need to have all three parts, not just a thing you want the audience to believe. You have to have the information, the research, and an explanation about why it supports your idea. And that's an excellent example of why people won't necessarily believe you right away when you have a claim and some information. You have to explain that argument. So she couldn't just say, it's more expensive. My information is, it's more expensive. She actually explained exactly why it was more expensive. So, in broad brushstrokes, that was a good speech. I probably would have evaluated that speech. She did kind of have some moments where I don't think she cited things properly. Um, again, her introduction and conclusion didn't really have that explicit listing of all the main points that she was going to cover / did cover. You need to do it on both ends, and have that repetition in there. So she would have lost a few points there, but I would have easily given this an A minus, possibly a B plus if I was really going to be persnickety about her transitions and reviews, which were a little bit wanting. But it was a good speech, um, at least in terms of mechanics. So that's kind of where I'm at in terms of grading you guys as well. So if you can do at least as good a job as she does, you will get at least a B plus on this speech. I hope watching that example kind of helped you and put your mind at ease. It's, again, not a very long speech. I'm not asking you to do a whole lot. You just need to find 3 statements you want the audience to believe regarding your topic. You need to find some information to support those statements. Don't forget to cite. And then explain why you think that information supports your idea. Once you're done writing that, you just slap an introduction and conclusion on it. Um, Again, you can kind of refer to the information speech or the informative speech documentation for that. It's also in your workbook as well. There is also an outline, where I get too rambly here, that you can use for the persuasive speech. I do believe it is labeled. It is actually labeled the group speech outline, as I believe, because this class skips the group speech. Um, but the persuasive. See, I'm reading what I wrote instead of talking. um, the persuasive speech outline is in there for you to look at. Want to kind of structure it that way. There's also an outline in there that talks about the Monroe's motivated sequence. I do go over that in the pre-recorded video. I'm not going to go over it tonight. But that is also another way that you can structure your speech if you feel it is appropriate. Again, I'm assuming that you will watch that other video, so what I'm talking about. Otherwise, as always, you can ask me questions, but this is basically what you need to do, how you do it. I will, you know what, for the sake of sure that you get this information, let's go ahead and post this on Blackboard immediately. Then we'll be done for the evening. If there's anyone out there that has any questions, go ahead and ask in chat. And it actually seems like the person or people that were watching actually left. So I'm not going to necessarily wait any longer. It was a 49-minute broadcast, so thanks again for your attention. You do have another video to watch when you're done with this one. Sorry, I guess. It is a busy week, but it's your last week, and what I can see, I did look at a few people's speeches that were turned in earlier, like over like Thursday and Friday. It seems like as a group you are doing everything properly and correct, so I'm not too worried, and hopefully you're not either. I hope that you're at least enjoying talking about topics of your own selection, and looking forward to wrapping up this summer session. I'm looking forward to looking at your stuff in more detail. So thank you so much for being on top of things. Thank you so much for asking questions. I'm going to go ahead and sign off now. Have a wonderful evening, morning, or afternoon, or depending on what time it is you watch this video. See you later this week. Probably by probably I mean Wednesday, at around 7:30 p.m. for our kind of our follow up broadcast / our final broadcast. Thanks again.